Welcome to the Out Leadership Australia Summit 2020 COVID style. We are sending social distant love to all of you. Very, very excited to be here with our Australian community from Out Leadership and many of you around the world that are joining in. For those of you that may not be aware, it is custom in Australia to begin with a welcome to country, should we have an Indigenous elder here. As I am not an Indigenous person, we are going to listen to an acknowledgement. So I would like to firstly acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Kaurna people. I want to pay my respect to elders, past, present, and emerging, and to pay my respects to the land, to the sky, and the waters, and the plains. This land and its sovereignty has never been ceded. Now, what's really interesting and a wonderful synergy for this panel, which will make sense to you in a minute, is I would really like to share some words from Yothu Yindi, a fantastic, phenomenal, very well-known Australian Aboriginal band that's very prolific. And I acknowledge that they're from the Yolngu homelands in Eastern Arnhem Land. Obviously not where we are right now, but there's a beautiful connection for our guests tonight. So, Yothu Yindi and Pussy Riot performed in Adelaide at the Fringe last year. And can send you the footage later. It's spectacular. So I just want to take some words from the song Treaty that Pussy Riot sang on that stage. This land was never given up. This land was never bought and sold. The planting of the Union Jack never changed our law at all. Now, two rivers run their course, separated for so long. I'm dreaming of a brighter day when the waters will be one. Now, one's a great way to finish because one is connected to AsOne, and that's why we're here. You saw when you signed up Women in Sport, but boy, have we got a treat for you. This is Out as One. FIFA, Women World Cup, and the business of human rights and major sporting events. That was way better in the rehearsal. So we are really thrilled to bring this panel to you. And before we start, we want to get you really excited. I'm kitted up tonight in the Matildas. Australia and New Zealand, if you didn't know already and got the memo, have won the bid for the 2023 World Cup. So within our SoGS community in Australia, we're so excited that 2023 is when Sydney will be hosting World Pride, first time in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, history's being made on the football pitch and off in 23 as well. So we've got a little excerpt from what was the bid, but as I said, spoiler alert, they have won it. So we're going to hear more about that soon. We're just going to play you a little bit from that clip to get you all fired up.
Having had the privilege of competing in 4 World Cups, it fills me with so much pride to know that we will have the opportunity to showcase our world-class facilities, dedicated team base camps, and put our stunning host cities on the map. Both of our countries have placed women's football as a priority, showing true commitment to growing the game, and hosting in 2023 will further build on that legacy. We are ready to deliver the greatest FIFA Women's World Cup the world has ever seen.
Thanks, Ali. The Women's World Cup is the pinnacle of our sport and truly what dreams are made of. The best teams in the world, the best players in the world participating on the biggest stage. This is about inspiring the next generation of girls by leading the way on the field and off it. We're ready to embrace the world and make you feel right at home too. Let's do this together and make history in 2023.
Together.
Kotahitana.
Skupai.
Sange.
Juntos.
Yeme.
Tayo.
Yose. Nasoa.
Pakataha.
Together as one.
To all the FIFA Council members, g'day from down under. As we navigate our way through these challenging times for the world, we would be honoured to bring the world together for the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023. Australia and our New Zealand cousins have a long history of achieving great things together and working hand in hand, as we have shown through our partnership approach to the COVID-19 crisis. My government has committed its full support to deliver a groundbreaking tournament. Being home to over 200 cultures, all 32 teams will experience that feeling of playing in front of a home crowd, with the biggest matches played in the biggest stadiums. Australians and New Zealanders are passionate about our sport and our football, and it would be an honour to host the largest women's sporting event in the world. Together, let's make history in 2023.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm here today with the support of the New Zealand Government and the people of Aotearoa to say that we would love to see you all here in 2023. You already know that Australia and New Zealand have the facilities, the expertise, the scarves and the passion to deliver the best ever FIFA Women's World Cup. We are leaders not only in women's football, but in the journey to achieve gender equality both on and off the pitch. We've achieved equality in pay for our women's national teams, and this is something we are very proud of. This tournament will provide an opportunity to grow women's football across all of Asia Pacific and beyond. We'll shine a light on the women's game like never before. Let's come together as one in 2023.
Did you get goosies? I got goosies. I'm very, very excited. We have got the most incredible intersectional panel tonight and expertise everywhere, off the field, on the field. Tonight, or this afternoon, this morning, wherever it is that you're watching this, it is my absolute pleasure to bring this panel to you. And as one, we are going to talk about this conversation about human rights and sport, and whether sport belongs in the political arena, and you can have your thoughts about that, and I'm really, really excited for our panel to share. So we're going to kick this off with one of the most foremost authorities on Australia's role at the international level, gender equality expert. My personal favourite is that she drinks a beer with Chancellor Angela Merkel, and so, you know, what's not to love? She's very, very Googleable, so I won't try. I think she needs a different bio every single time she speaks because she's got such a breadth of thought leadership. You probably guessed already who it is. This is Professor Susan Harris-Rimmer. Round of applause. And Sue, I want to kick off by firstly saying thank you for joining us. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited that you could join this panel is not only is this your thought leadership, but you are almost single-handedly responsible for doing the impact report on the human rights aspect of the bid for AsOne 2023. And so there's nobody better positioned to give us a little bit of context about that. So how about we start with a quick fire round though. Are you ready? You know, I feel a bit game showy tonight. So I want to firstly ask you, who is it that is your icon as a female thought leader in any genre that you feel resonates with you right now? Share with us a power woman. We're at an Out Women event. We want a power woman that inspires you, past, present, emerging.
Well, I was so keen to help the FIFA Women's World Cup bid because I adore the way Sam Kerr plays and the way she speaks and just everything about her. She's super cool. But my icon would have to be Mary Robinson. I grew up in the middle of pretty much nowhere in a place called Coonabarabran, and I found out about Mary Robinson, and I had a sad, adorable scrapbook filled with all her speeches and everything about her as a young girl. That's pretty sad, isn't it? But she does a heap of work on business and human rights, and she's extremely active in this idea of improving the human rights record of mega sporting events. So she is a big inspiration for me.
Well, I mean, this wasn't a planted question, but I'm glad that you brought her up because obviously she's integral to Sporting Chance, one of the fantastic conferences that really does delve into this and has a SOGIesque lens to it with some of the organisations like ILGA World, Athlete Ally, doing phenomenal work that are bridging this gap. Okay, one more quick fire round. Are you ready? Please don't say us for this answer, but what is your worst Zoom experience in this COVID time that we've accelerated our Zooming? I bet you've got some crackers.
I did an interview on international television with my dog. Head kept popping up on my lap. But my favourite is a lady who was caught doing a trade negotiation, accidentally left her camera on, was cleaning her oven the whole way through it.
Oh, there's so much about women and multitasking on that, isn't there? The things we have to do. So, Sue, talk to us about the bid, about how you got involved, although I imagine that wasn't difficult, and the journey. Like, how on earth did Australia and New Zealand come together for this bid? So just talk to us about the journey.
I love soccer. I used to follow Canberra women's team in the W League. Now I follow Brisbane Roar. I'm a Liverpool fan. I go for the Socceroos, the whole deal. But I'm not what you would call a wildly sporty human myself. I'm a little bit of a bookworm, but I'm very interested in human rights generally. And so I was the human rights advisor to the Commonwealth Games that was held in the Gold Coast recently. And of course, this is an area of human rights that's just expanding all the time, and rightly so, because there's been scandal after scandal plaguing mega sporting events all over the world, and they're large money-making and profile events. So given my experience with the Commonwealth Games, I was asked to do an independent human rights assessment for the FIFA Women's World Cup. This is the first time they've ever had independent human rights assessments, so you can read them separately to the bid, and you can see how the bid has incorporated the human rights advice they were given. But even for something like the FIFA Women's World Cup, I was the only woman to write the human rights bid, and I was the only kind of feminist perspective. So I tried to incorporate a feminist perspective into the work, and an intersectional feminist perspective, and I was very glad to see that it was picked up in the major bid and that we won. It was amazing. But you heard what Jacinda Ardern said there. It is a broader gender equality conversation. Well, it's the opportunity for a broader gender equality conversation. And it's also a broader opportunity to talk about sexual diversity and about ethical protest and about freedom of expression and about people's right to personal security whilst being able to express themselves. So it's more than one thing. And I think, human rights, big sporting events are filled with all this rhetoric around, unifying and being beautiful and noble events, but actually they've caused a lot of serious human harm in their history. So I think it's very good that FIFA and other organisations have been pushed into getting better, having better due diligence, having better processes. I do want to emphasise, though, that they've got a long way to go, all the internet, the IOC, FIFA, the Commonwealth Games, the Olympics, before becoming what I would call human rights promoting organisations. But, this is a good first step. So Australia had said it was going to make the bid, and then suddenly it was 16 teams, and then suddenly it was 32 teams, and then suddenly we were with New Zealand, and it was all good fun. It was stressful.
That's incredible. There's the footage of when everybody lifts up off those chairs. I mean, all rules go out the window at that moment. It's just a dream come true.
I do think that FIFA really needs a clean games. It needs a games where we can pretty much guarantee there won't be, corruption or forced labour or all kinds of issues. So I'm really hoping that this is a chance to set a bar quite high, and then other bids will be forced to try to match that.
So, I mean, you can tell she's a professor, right? I mean, no one could put it like that. But I'm really glad that you touched on the ethics of protest. And when you think about human rights and you think about disruption, I think it's impossible to go anywhere but Russia as your first thought. Going back from the Winter Olympics in Sochi, and obviously more recently the 2018 World Cup in Russia. And guess what? We haven't introduced them yet, but they're here. Olya and Nika are two of the members of the infamous Pussy Riot. So not only do we have the academia side, but we have the activism, artivism, disruption side, and it's a great chance for us in a safe space to break that down. Because I think, as you'll hear from Nika and Olya soon, much of their work has been demonized in some contexts, and it's really important to normalize that. And I think we're in for such a treat, and really firsthand here to hear the journey that Nika and Olya have gone on since 2018, and of course for those that have been following this conversation, Sochi very much into 2014. So without further ado, hello in Moscow. It's absolutely brilliant to have you with us. Now, we wanted to say hello to you first, but we're going to show a clip that's made its round, possibly viral, and then some. So stick with us. And for the audience playing at home, let's see if you can work out the similarities between Exhibit A here and the video that we're about to roll. Policeman enters the game. Okay, enjoy.
Дорогой друг, ты, наверное, знаешь о том, что в России нет правового государства, и любой полицейский может просто так ворваться в твою жизнь.
Чемпионат мира прекрасный. Показал, какими могут быть полицейские в России. Но что будет, когда он закончится?
Вывод и выход один. Нужно бороться за то, чтобы в России перестали фабриковать уголовные дела и арестовывать людей просто так.
А чтобы это произошло, нужна еще такая штука под названием политическая конкуренция. Возможность для всех участвовать в жизни страны и избираться.
Все это очень простые штуки. Но ты должен для себя решить, что именно ты можешь сделать, чтобы твоя Россия стала гораздо прекраснее.
И еще вот что. Сегодня 11 лет со смерти поэта Пригова. А он вошел в русскую культуру циклом стихов про милиционера. Почитай про него.
Ну, а нас же сейчас ждут на футболе, где нам надо рассказать всем про небесного милиционера и про милиционера земного, а также пару важных требований, которые ты увидишь в конце ролика.
Кое-что про этих двух милиционеров еще написано тут ниже в описании. Ну, до встречи, дружок.
Прекрасный, очень красивый, очень динамичный эпизод. Так, что такое болельщики выбежали?
Когда земной милиционер вступает в игру, мы требуем: 1. Освободить всех политических заключенных. 2. Не сажать за лайки. 3. Прекратить незаконные аресты на митингах. 4. Допустить политическую конкуренцию в стране. 5.
I never tire of seeing that moment. And just going back to our little pop quiz we're going to have with the audience, we'll be tweeting while this is on. Tell us if you notice something similar in the video and with our friends here. And we are prepared to commit to a phenomenal intrinsic reward that we will report back. So have some fun with that. The hashtags are OutWomen and OL Summit Oz and AsOne, which is the bid, obviously, that we've spoken about. So Olya and Nika, hello. this is not our first rodeo. This is the last time we were together was Bristol for the social media week. Prior to that, you joined us and you are part of the global task force at Planet LA for the Miles of Love task force around travel advocacy. And that was in Hong Kong. This one, we can't get you down under, but it is so great to see you. How are you?
We are good. Thank you, Bess.
Now, I did tell you that this is for a corporate audience. Are you ready for your pop quiz? We're going to go quick fire. Have you tested your buzzer? Okay, they're ready.
Yes,
if you remember the
question.
question.
Internet connection very bad, so yeah, just let it be like it is.
Okay. Your favorite?
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's a miracle we can pull this off already. Because it's probably appropriate to say now to hold space for Jaiyah Saelua, who was meant to be joining us, a phenomenal Pacific activist, but not just that, American Samoan men's football player, the first trans woman to be out at FIFA in a World Cup qualifier match, and it's a real shame that we've not been able to have her, but Sue will pick back up on that later because I think there's a conversation in terms of human rights and access to tech that unfortunately prevents us. And I also want to just quickly hold space that it is Trans Awareness Week, and obviously on the 20th it will be Trans Day of Remembrance, and so we hold that. And also we are very deliberately not going to cover intersex issues because we've spoken with our intersex community activists and thought leaders, and we don't feel like we can do that justice right now. It needs a panel of entire intersex activists, and you really can't think about sports and human rights lately without thinking about intersex and sex characteristics, and with Costa and all of the attention that's been around that issue. Back to our quiz. I just gave you a bit more thinking time. Do you have an inspirational woman? I mean, it could probably be the person next to you, to be honest, but somebody that has influenced you in the world, alive or not?
I would be like not very original. I would say that Marina Abramovich is my inspiration. Like, she is an art, and because all the huge work that she's done, I would say she's like mother of performance. She's like an icon for me.
That's awesome.
So, I think that there are really a lot of wonderful women, and not only women, but also men and non-binary people that who inspire me a lot. I would say maybe that I think about Marina Abramovich too because of her impact to art, and because her wonderful performative practices. And I think that really she is a person who made some new, very huge, important things in art. And I also would like to mention Katrin Nenasheva. It's a wonderful Russian contemporary artist. She's young and she's very cool, and actually we both made a project about depression and mental health problems. And so she's really very cool and very powerful, and she always works with very difficult subjects, with very problematic subjects. I think, yes, she's new age of performative art.
So I want something that I've not spoken to you about, and I know we've done a few events around the world, but sometimes if people think about someone running on the field, Sue and I put that in an Aussie context, or me living in Hong Kong for so long with the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens, we're always waiting for a moment when someone's had just enough to drink that they think they might be able to, run the length of the pitch. And to give you a quick language lesson for those non-Australians, we sometimes call it a streaker on the field, and that may be, why is that, Sue?
Because they're usually naked.
Yeah, it's a thing. Maybe, who knows what's going to happen? We never know what's going to happen out of these events that Planet Ally run. But anyway, moving on. We'll edit that bit out, I'm sure, so there's no culpability. The thing is, when some people maybe haven't paid enough attention to 2018 and taking that moment of policeman enters the game, but when we look at all of the work that has been released, even before that from Pussy Riot, there's demands that are listed, right? So there were 6 demands, if you caught that on the video, from letting all political prisoners free, not imprisoning for likes, that huge social media influence, I think, we could talk about that for a long time, and the way that we're scapegoated and catalysts in our movement and human rights defenders in general, and particularly women. Stopping illegal arrests at rallies, allowing political competition in the country, not fabricating criminal accusations, and not keeping people in jail for no reason, which unfortunately I feel like that again is something that you both can speak to, and to turn the earthly policeman into the heavenly policeman. But I want to ask in terms of 2 things, because I love the story that you share about the time and preparation for that disruptive moment invading the pitch first. And the second thing is how much work goes into coming together as a group and listing those demands, because they're not light. They're very clear, specific, actionable, we feel, right, Sue? So talk to us about that.
Actually, making a list of things that we are claimed to is usually, it takes some time, because you have to be very clear, you have to be very specific, and you have to be very up to date, to highlight the most important problem of the time. So making the list and coming together takes some, some weeks maybe of thinking, and then it's a long process. Yeah.
So
yes, and we just discuss all the things, and we really try to be sorry. We're trying to be right. I don't know. Yeah, we just, try to be clear. To be clear, yes, we just want to be clear with our demands and in our manifests. And so, yeah, we just discussed that, we will say this, and this, and we will make a list of these things, and yeah. So. The list for the FIFA, for the final cup, is very wide. I mean, in the last action with the LGBT flags, it was specific list for the LGBTQ rights, and to the football, policeman enters the game. It's very wide list, because we talked about things that happen everywhere in Russian every time, Yes, and the main idea was to compare some beautiful Russia and some ugly Russia, because during the FIFA World Cup, we really could see very nice and polite police officers. They were really really nice. They didn't look like bad guys, but we know that usually they are rather bad guys. And for us, it was important
are earthly policemen and heavenly policemen, and like wonderful Russia, like a country of dreams, and some really real ugly Russia.
So, and just in terms of, you know, that moment when I saw you on the field, my interpretation of that is that must have been taking months to prepare, so many rehearsals, clocking the time. You probably had a clipboard like, you know, Coach Bess here. Oh, it's all going haywire. But how long did it actually take you to prepare and obviously then perform?
Best, we don't love to be so specific about like preparation, the actions, because if we talk like that, the magic disappears. That so we would say like that takes some time. Okay, will be enough.
It took some time, but it wasn't long. And actually, for example, I lived in St. Petersburg that time, so I had to come to Moscow to rehearse. And so I didn't, make it dozens of times, just, I don't know, a couple of times I came to Moscow to rehearse. And the main preparations, I would say, were just the couple of days before the action. But I mean, like, that time we were totally in action, working on action, like, you know.
So tell me, just the last question before we go to Sue, in terms of a recent that you just touched on, Nika, with the rainbow flags, and I don't know how many are aware of this, obviously, Nika, and if you feel okay to talk about this, would you like to share that gesture to the Russian community, to the Russian government, and one special person in particular that was devoted to? Can you lead us into the recent action in September?
Yeah, sure. So we made an action. It was the Putin's birthday, and we decided to give him a present. So we tried to present him some human rights, because you know the LGBTQ situation in Russia is like very awful. We still have the anti-gay law. We still have a very big stigma, and we have no discussion about like gay rights and stuff. So we decided to like highlight this situation, because you know we had a new very strange law. Gay fathers would be separated with their children, and they will be persecuted just because they are biologically male. So it strikes me very hard. So we put rainbow flags to some administration buildings, like the administration of the president and the courts and stuff. Yeah, so some of us,
the Ministry of Culture and FSB.
Yes, and
actually special services.
Yeah, so we made it in the Putin's birthday, and we had a manifest where we said that it's time to give presents not for president, because he already have everything, but it's time to give presents for like people who live in Russia, because Russia is not Putin, Russia is us. So we try to present some human rights through this action. After that, all of us was like persecuted. My court would be like in 2 weeks. One of our members was put in jail for 30 days, and it's like a lot. Yeah, but we made it, and I think it's a good action. Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much. Take a break, stay still. We'll keep Zooming with you. Sue, I feel like because you're a professor, well, I feel like I've got to go sit in the naughty corner, but also I want you to critique from all that you know and all that you, your thought leadership, that action, your thoughts about it, and you touched on the ethics of protests, and I think this is really important. And as we're having this conversation within the context of out leadership, there's a very, very delicate, conversation for business and human rights. But for this action, do you want to get your red pen out and grade it? Like, do you want to give us a sense of what your feeling was when you saw it? And on the flip side, the ethics of that, and whether there would have been another suggestion that you had in when they got their assignment back.
Oh, not really. I'm always going to defer to Pussy Riot on matters of human rights in Russia. They certainly know better than I. What I would say is that non-violent creative protest is the heart of human rights. And these mega sporting events need to make some space and some room and give some air to amplifying the voices of civil society that are struggling with real problems. I think this idea that, the host country and city is perfect and has no dirty laundry. We saw it in Sydney when we hosted the Olympics, the idea that we, removed all the homeless people, relocated them, that we tried to, cover over some of the issues we have with asylum policy and with our treatment of First Nations people. It's much better to be authentic and to say what human rights issues you're struggling with and try to give some help to those people during this time, because the point of a sporting event is that you get attention, right? So if you are struggling to be heard around your human rights issues, you have the world's media at your doorstep for moments during some of these events. So it is much better for the host city to say, we're going to offer some oxygen to these human rights defenders. We are going to listen to them. We're going to understand. We're going to let them have safe ways to express their feelings about things. That is the way to show we're a civilized and sophisticated democracy. We're going to listen to the stolen wealth protesters at the Commonwealth Games. We're actually going to keep them safe and listen to them. That's the way to handle it, rather than just intense surveillance security. Often these mega sporting events are used to experiment with different security methods. There's usually extraordinary legislation passed, the G20 as well, APEC, the big meetings. There's often this new types of security technology. So for me, it's about making sure civil society groups have really good dialogue with security so that they have a respectful agreement about protesting and what it's going to look like and how it's going to happen, that the protesters are kept safe. They don't need to be arrested for anything that doesn't hurt anybody else. This idea that if you're protesting to have your voice heard, but you're not destroying anything and you're not hurting anyone, you're taking the risk yourself. I see that as ethical protest. What I would say, though, is that sometimes it can be hard to discern in the moment. We have to keep the players safe, right? I'm concerned that the FIFA Women's World Cup might be a target for extreme misogyny. We've seen in the US, Megan Rapinoe and others are targets and Twitter for some pretty terrible kinds of hate speech. So we have to keep the players safe. So I would say there's a compromise between keeping the players safe on the pitch and ethical protest. So it's just about managing and having some dialogue and some legitimate, open, real talk about the human rights issues. So my view is we're probably going to see some protests around climate change at the FIFA Women's World Cup. We have at every other big Australian summit because of our stance on climate change. There was the most beautiful creative protests at the G20 summit in Brisbane, the Climate Angels and Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples uniting around climate activism through kayaking and a whole range of very clever protests. But but the idea is, if you're going to bring the world media to a place, you should expect your human rights defenders to try to take advantage of that, and you should give them as much safety to be able to exercise their right to protest. And getting that balance right is something I think no major sporting event has actually managed yet.
I'm glad that you touched on climate change, and again, holding space for our magical Jaiyah. I want to just share something. A year ago, almost to the day, we took some activists from around the world as part of our Miles of Love Travel Advocacy Forum to Queer Displacements, which is an absolutely incredible, Australia's first real dialogue, bringing asylum seekers, lived experience, refugees, and allies and academics and government all together. And I was very, very proud that we were able to present the conversation on climate change with an all-Pacific panel. And one of our Pacific Island task force members on the Miles of Love Task Force said this, and this is a shout out to Joseph Sakulu, who we love, a Tongan gay Pacific climate change warrior. And he said, our island ecosystems are suffering the most extreme impacts of climate change, with our homelands, cultures, and traditional livelihoods being threatened by erosion. Increased severity of natural disasters, sea levels rise, flooding, landslides, coral bleaching, and ocean acidification. So there's a fair bit to possibly protest about there. But I also just want to hold space. 2 years ago, the ILGA World Conference was held in Wellington, a day after the massacre. And so that was a very poignant time for us to be down there. And some people were in the air while this happened, some had landed. But what we did learn later, after the fact, without us knowing then, is that the LGBTIQA plus community was actually included in the manifesto. So, yeah, I think it's a really important point that you bring up, Sue, and I'm glad that you're part of that dialogue. So I guess the legacy, obviously we're balancing. Australia has some work to do on the human rights front internationally, and that's no secret. That's been spoken about at the Human Rights Council. But the opportunity for, unlike perhaps a country like Qatar, when we think about the laws in Qatar and fan safety as well as player safety, Australia and New Zealand coming together can really offer a legacy. And what are some of the hopes that you personally want to see from that might come out of it?
I want to see the FIFA Women's World Cup event strive to be feminist, to have a real conversation about gender equality, not just in sport, but more generally. And I want everyone to also be able to have some creativity around the events. So you've been hearing in the video, the clip, there's a focus on young girls playing sport. Look, I think that's fantastic, but I want young girls to, think that they could basically have choice in the kinds of things that they do in their lives. So I want it to be a broad conversation. I want it to celebrate the First Nations and Maori players, the Pacific players. I want it to, really encourage gender diversity and sexual diversity. I want there to be complete safety for everyone concerned. I want it to be, I talk about football and sport generally has an obsession with physical infrastructure, and I want us to start thinking about moral infrastructure, normative infrastructure, creative infrastructure, so that we're stretching people's minds when we host these events. And of course, Australia is also going to make a bid for the 2032 Olympics. So it's another good opportunity to start saying, if there is nobility in sport, let's start really aiming for something that's a bit more inclusive than the kind of the capitalist approach to these big sporting events. So yeah, I'm hoping that it stretches us a bit, but I must say they are massive money-making enterprises, and they are Phoenix enterprises. So they appear and then they're gone. It doesn't really promote a lot of accountability to human rights.
And actually on that, because there's a segue, we can talk about our out leadership members and those that are listening that are in the business community. What could be a call to action in terms of how they can get on board to support some of the legacy goals and the work that's been done in gender equality in general? But how can this be leveraged and businesses get on board?
Well, first start, really thinking about their supply chains. You could make this a slave labor free event. You could make this an event where workers are not exploited. It's a chance to clean up your tourism and make sure that all the migrant women that work in tourism in the Asia Pacific have a better deal. There's endless ways that businesses can go a bit deeper and dig a bit deeper and become a more human rights compliant enterprise. But just thinking about women's thriving as less a corporate or profit opportunity and more about an investment, in a better environment, better infrastructure. So we'll see. But what I would like is for groups like Pussy Riot to be celebrated rather than put in jail. I want to see it flipped a little bit, right? So we have to think harder about who is an extremist, and what kinds of extremism should be accommodated and listened to and thought offered a deeper kind of space. So I just want the world to listen to women for a little while, and not just because of their amazing skill with the football, but also because of everything they represent.
So just planting a tiny hustle seed out in the world, because we've got a couple of years here, folks. You can already hear firsthand from Nika, hear from Olya. 23, I think, would be a lovely time to visit Australia. I hear the weather's, going to be cracking at that time. And my kids are keen to play in our swimming pool with you guys. So we really hope that some of what you're hearing is not separating, this idea of political action and separating the idea of human rights defenders are not, part of this business community. And we're seeing that morph, as you touched on, Megan Rapinoe, and I want to give a shout out to the Australian bobsled team, because during the Sochi Winter Olympics, they actually openly supported what was going on with the propaganda law and something called the Principle 6 campaign. And the legacy of that is that the IOC guidelines have changed for bidding. So there's some incredible, tangible examples of what can be done. So going back to Nika and Olya, just before we wrap, and Sue, I'm going to give you the opportunity to be my Q&A. So have a think about a question that you might like to ask. Nika and Olya on the other side, have a think about anything you'd like to ask the professor. You can tell she's a wealth of wisdom. But just talk to us about, obviously, Planet Ally, the clue is in the name, allyship. Talk to me about allyship from the perspective of feminist rights and being an ally to feminist movements. And more specifically, how can we be an ally to you?
Okay. I think that you are already the ally to us, I would say. And I think that, we are always happy to see any solidarity, just to feel some support. And of course, we're really happy to travel around the world to share experience, to meet activists and human rights activists and artists in other countries, and just to exchange our experiences. I think it's really important, and I think it can help people to maybe to somehow make better their work in their countries if they have some difficulties in their work, or some, or if they work with some problems. So when we get some international experience, then we can understand something, I don't know, something new, just, to meet some new things and to get some new knowledges. I think it's cool, and yeah, thank you. So, we're always happy to come to Hong Kong, to Australia, to, I don't know,
Bristol,
somewhere else, just to be with you and to make something together.
Well, I remember asking you that question in Hong Kong, and your answer was, get us an opportunity. So I am so thrilled anytime I get to bring you into this dialogue. And much like Masha and the Pussy Riot members in Adelaide for Fringe probably didn't expect to be on the steps of Parliament House last year in a Chechnya solidarity protest with Amnesty International and Planet Ally, you probably did not expect to be in a business summit, and probably you take the cake for the most disruptive, radical headshots, because I think, Nika, we used you behind bars, and I think, Olya, we used you with your World Cup pass. But listen, this has been absolutely extraordinary. I've got one more question to ask you before I hand it to the great professor, and that is, I guess, delicately thinking about our queer community and thinking about those that may even be watching this and struggling with their journey, whether they're out at work and they're not out at home, or the opposite, whether they're in that phase and needing some inspiration and boost. I guess for me as a human rights defender and former Out leadership member, I want to ask you about, you know that you're putting your body on the line, quite literally. Like, we've just watched you be dragged. And I must say, you did get points for presentation. You can tell that you're artistic because you make it look beautiful. But in a little bit more serious note, you are the epitome of what I think, and I think I can see Sue already non-verbally agreeing with me, of what it is to really put everything out there to seek change. Where does that come from inside you that you just, as to use a football analogy, you don't leave anything on the pitch, quite literally again. What is it? Where does that come from? And Nika, you know, you've got a court date coming up, like, you know, where you just keep going. But what can you share with us, like, where that comes from?
Oh, it comes from, you know, the environment. I mean, we live in Russia, and it's very special, close ecosystem which we have to face every day. And you know, the atmosphere, the political situation, it gives some inspiration, I would say, because you always feel like you have to move, and you have, you know, you're like useless. You have to do a lot of stuff to make this work. So I don't know. I mean, I get my best inspiration and best this, you know, thing to go and to make from like Russia and the things around me.
So yes, I would maybe add a little that when we see a lot of injustice around us, we just feel that we want to protest somehow, to riot, to deal with it, to make something with it. So I think it's just, yes, it's maybe, you know, this dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Between
yeah,
between the real world, like the real Russia, and our dream about, about normality in a good way, about justice and so on, about social justice.
Amazing. Handballing. Or no, we're playing football. So you're making a run down the wing, Sue, and I'm going to chip you a little ball just inside the box. You're going to score by asking the final question.
I guess I'm interested in this idea that the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023 is all about inspiring the next generation. So I guess I'm interested in how your activities as human rights defenders inspire the next generation. Do you worry about who's going to continue your tradition of resistance? Do you worry about what comes next? I'm very concerned about what's happening to my region in terms of climate change, and it's speeding up so fast, and you feel like you just don't know what legacy you're giving your children. So I'm interested in this. I'm always interested in this idea of intergenerational justice. Yeah. So I'm just would love to know what you think, how you feel about your legacy and what's going to happen with the next generation of girls.
Question to us?
Yes.
For you?
So, I think that the next generation and maybe generations are going to make huge changes because, they are very powerful and they are independent. I mean that they know what they want. They know what they don't want to make they don't like to do. And I have a sister, she's 16 years old now, and she's very progressive and she's very cool, and she has the feeling of huge freedom inside. So she never do things doesn't want to do. And yeah, sometimes it's maybe not good because, like, for example, when I ask her to help me with something in housework, she can say me that, like, oh no, I don't want, but sometimes she agrees. So it's okay. And I just, I'm really sure that, like, she will never give the opportunity some people to hurt her somehow, because she knows how to protect herself. And I think that I can say the same about her friends and about nowadays teenagers, about this generation. I really believe in them. And we had some protests not this summer but the last summer, and there were a lot of school students participating in this protest, and students and teenagers, and I think they are cool. So I don't worry about the future because we have them.
And they have you. Well, I think we're into extra time. Don't you love them? I'm ripping them all out now, Sue. You can join me anytime, or am I sinking the ship on my own? So we are going to wrap this up, but I think it is appropriate that I just disclaim something on camera. You'll see a little tag here. And it's not that I'm so stingy that I did not pay for my shirt, but when I purchased it yesterday, I didn't realize that the tag is on it. So it's not like I've been influenced, because as Sue's talked about, we're talking about non-violent, right? You can see you've had an incredible, precious insight into the mind of two of, our heroes, but human rights defenders who are doing what they can with the opportunities they need. And for me personally, when Nika and Olya and the other members were on that field, I found it a moment of thank goodness there's something has happened, because the silence was deafening around the conversation, and I kept waiting and waiting for something to happen, especially given the legacy and the work around Sochi. But I think it's safe to say you have had such a treat. It's safe to say Todd knew what he was getting himself in for, because I used to curate the Asia Pacific summits and throw my hat in the ring with some crazy ideas. But I genuinely want to say, as a call to action, you've got some world-class speakers right here, but specifically to Nika and to Olya and to the other members of Pussy Riot, I really hope that there are some business leaders that can, I'll use the term that Out Leadership do, ally up and be brave enough. As Sue said, don't shy away from these conversations. They are happening anyway, right? And so there's always going to be ways that it'll feel hypocritical. I know that there's very contentious moments with business and heads of state, but find a way, find a loophole if you can. And I like football's been a vehicle for us to explore this, and sport in general. But I really do hope, get in touch. I've appointed myself your unofficial agent across a few continents now. So get in touch. We'll love to see more opportunities and more visibility on this. So all that's left for us to do is possibly have a fangirl moment. And I mentioned about the last time I was with Olya and Nika was in Bristol, and I was gifted something. Here, insert prop. And I feel like I do this as much for you than me, right? I've got to keep telling you. They gifted me with this wonderful balaclava, and I want to put it on, and I want to ask Nika and Olya to say that famous line that Pussy Riot say about starting something and never stopping. Are you ready? 1, hope Zoom helps us out. 1, 2, 3. You know what? I didn't ask them the pop quiz about Zoom, because I would have been the answer. It's start the riot and never stop. Thanks very much, Zoom. I got it right. I need to make sure I get my mark. Did I get full marks? Yes. Okay. So listen, this is only day 2 of the Australian Summit. There is so much more. And off the back of NAIDOC Week last week, don't miss later in the week a really powerful Indigenous rights conversation, which I'm really proud to see is on the curation. There's so much more. So use the app, connect, shake the world gently. And as far as Planet Ally, hang on. We say we want to live on a planet of allies. So thank you for taking this time to be with us and be on this allyship journey. I hope you're all gearing up to buy your shirt if you don't have it already, to support the Matildas. Note to self, make sure you get them to clip it. We thank you so much for joining us. I want to give a massive shout to the Mosaic Audio Visual team. Man, did they hook us up tonight. Woo! It is absolutely incredible, the effort and the allyship that they give to us. This is a low-budget production, and they have just given us everything. They've left it on the pitch. See, I've got one more in. So, Sue, thank you so much, and all of the work that you're doing, have done. I just take my hat off to you. I'm really, really excited to keep following the thought leadership and for getting that bid across the line. I think it's not, it's not too much of a stretch to say that impact of the impact study most certainly made a difference. So congratulations and thank you. Nika, Olya, love you so much.
Yeah.
This was your first corporate gig. Expect all of the Out Leadership members now to be getting in touch with me to have you. So pack your bags when we're post-COVID, because I think you're going to be busy. And thank you for all that you do. we absolutely thank every ounce of your determination and your sacrifice, not just for Russia, but for our entire movement. Thank you so much, everybody. And I feel like I need to say class dismissed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mwah.